The combat training hall stretched before me like a monument to galactic superiority. All gleaming metal surfaces and holographic targeting systems that hummed with barely contained power. I'd been stationed at the Intergalactic Military Academy for 3 cycles now, and honestly, I'd seen enough incompetent cadets to fill a cargo freighter. My name is Vex-Krill, 4th-tier combat instructor for the Coalition Armed Forces, and I'd trained warriors from 67 different species. Draxians with their acid-spitting capabilities, Thornback mercenaries who could regenerate limbs, even those insufferable Quilnari telepaths who thought reading your opponent's mind made them invincible. Spoiler alert, it didn't. But humans? Oh, humans were something else entirely. They'd only joined the Coalition 5 years ago, stumbling into our corner of the galaxy with their chemical rockets and nuclear weapons like children bringing sticks to a plasma fight. Most of my colleagues found them amusing at best, pathetically primitive at worst. I fell somewhere in between, leaning heavily toward the latter. The door slid open with a pneumatic hiss, and she walked in. Cadet Emma Thorne, red hair pulled back in what humans called a ponytail, green eyes that seemed to absorb everything without giving anything away, and a duffel bag slung over one shoulder that looked older than some of the treaties holding our coalition together. "Cadet Thorne reporting for advanced weapons certification, sir," she said, her voice steady despite the fact that she was about to embarrass herself in front of 40 other cadets from a dozen different worlds. I clicked my mandibles together, the Kraxon equivalent of a dismissive snort. "You're late." "By 30 seconds, sir." "In combat, 30 seconds means you're dead." I gestured toward the weapons rack with one of my 4 arms. "Choose your instrument of failure." A few snickers rippled through the observation deck above us, where off-duty cadets had gathered to watch the training sessions. Humans had become something of a novelty act around here. Entertainment value, you understand, like watching a domesticated creature try to hunt. Emma's eyes swept across the rack. Plasma rifles capable of punching through reinforced battle armor. Graviton disruptors that could crush bone to powder. Molecular disruption pistols that could phase someone out of existence at the atomic level. Standard military hardware, really. Nothing fancy. She walked past all of it. My third eye focused on her more intently. "Problem, cadet?" "No, sir. Just wondering if you have anything more practical." The observation deck went silent. Someone, somewhere, had the good sense to start recording. This was either going to be spectacular or spectacularly stupid, and I was betting my monthly ration credits on the latter. "More practical?" I let out a clicking laugh that echoed off the metal walls. "You're looking at weapons that can eliminate a target from 3 kilometers away, and you want something practical? Different doesn't always mean better, sir." Oh, this was rich. I'd heard human arrogance before, but this was approaching legendary status. "Enlighten me, cadet. What exactly did you bring that could possibly compare to Coalition military technology?" She set the duffel bag down and unzipped it slowly. The sound seemed impossibly loud in the sudden quiet. "My grandfather's bow, sir." I actually stopped moving. All 4 arms just hung there while my brain processed what she'd just said. Your what?" "Compound bow, sir. Designed and built by my grandfather Marcus Thorne in Colorado back on Earth." She pulled it out carefully, almost reverently. The thing looked like it belonged in a museum, all cables and cams and carbon fiber that probably predated human spaceflight by decades. The observation deck erupted into laughter. Even Krath Tull, the stoic Draxian weapons specialist, was making that wheezing sound his species passed off as amusement. I'd never seen such unity among the various species before. Humans had managed to bring us all together through sheer, weapons-grade absurdity. "You brought a projectile weapon," I said slowly, making sure I understood correctly. "A tension-based, manually operated prehistoric launching device to an advanced military weapons certification." "Yes, sir." "And you expect to pass this course with it?" "Yes, sir." I spread my forearms wide, addressing the crowd above. "By all means, let's see what primitive human engineering can accomplish against modern military standards." This was going to be therapy material for years to come. I activated the training simulation, bringing up the standard Level 1 course. Holographic targets materialized across the training floor, stationary silhouettes that any first-year cadet could hit with their eyes closed. Literally. The Quilnari did it all the time just to show off. 20 targets, cadet. You have 60 seconds. Standard plasma rifle cadets complete this in 45 seconds with 98% accuracy. I crossed my upper arms while my lower ones worked the control panel. "Whenever you're ready." Emma stepped into position, that ancient bow held loosely in her left hand. She reached back into her bag and pulled out an arrow. An actual arrow. Wooden shaft, metal tip, plastic fletching in bright yellow that probably helped with visibility or something equally primitive. She knocked it, drew back the string, and the bow made this creaking sound that spoke of tension and potential energy stored in bent limbs and coiled cables. Her stance was weird, too. Sideways to the target, elbow high, anchor point at the corner of her mouth. Nothing like proper coalition firing positions. The first arrow flew. It hit the center target mass with a solid thunk that sounded obscenely loud after all the silent energy weapons I was used to. Before the first arrow stopped vibrating, she'd already drawn and released a second, then a third, fourth, fifth. Her hands moved in this fluid rhythm, draw and release, each motion flowing into the next like some kind of organic machine. The arrows whistled through the air with this distinctive sound, not the clean burn of plasma or the silent death of disruptor beams, but this raw, almost primal noise that made something deep in my evolutionary hindbrain sit up and pay attention. 15 seconds. 10 targets down. The observation deck had gone quiet again. 25 seconds. 18 targets down. I checked my chronometer twice, certain there was some kind of malfunction. No manual weapon system should be capable of this rate of fire. The mechanical systems alone should require more time to reset between shots. 30 seconds. 20 targets down. She lowered the bow, breathing slightly heavier, but not winded. "Course complete, sir." I stared at the chronometer. 30 seconds exactly. 100% accuracy. With a weapon that probably cost less than a single plasma rifle power cell. Beginner's luck, I managed finally, my voice sounding strange even to my own auditory receptors. "Level 2, moving targets, 60 seconds. She just nodded and collected more arrows from her bag. Level 2 was significantly harder. The targets moved on randomized paths at varying speeds, simulating enemy combatants in active combat situations. Most cadets needed the predictive targeting algorithms built into coalition weapons to handle this course with any degree of success. Emma tracked the first target with her eyes, led it slightly, and released. The arrow caught it dead center. She was already drawing on the next target before the first one even registered the hit. Here's the thing about watching someone who actually knows what they're doing with their equipment. It stops looking like work and starts looking like art. Her movements were economical, precise. No wasted energy. She tracked targets with her eyes and body positioning, making micro-adjustments that her arms and hands executed without conscious thought. It was simultaneously impressive and deeply, deeply annoying. 45 seconds later, all 20 targets were down. The observation deck was completely silent now. Krathtul had stopped laughing. Even the Quilnari cadets were leaning forward, their telepathic chatter probably going insane with commentary and analysis. I should have stopped, should have certified her and moved on with my life. But there was something about her casual competence that got under my exoskeleton. She was too calm, too confident, like she knew something I didn't, and I absolutely hated that feeling. "Level 7, I announced. Someone above gasped. Even Emma's eyes widened slightly. "Sir, protocol requires sequential progression through difficulty levels." "I'm the instructor, cadet. I determine protocol." I activated level 7, the setting we normally reserved for Special Forces candidates with years of combat experience. Let's see how your grandfather's toy handles actual combat scenarios. The training hall transformed. Holographic walls materialized, creating a maze-like urban environment. Targets appeared and disappeared randomly, some hostile, some civilian. Environmental hazards activated, simulating smoke, debris, and obscured sightlines. The lighting dropped to minimal levels, barely enough to see by human standards. And the targets? They shot back, holographic but fully interactive, capable of registering hits on the trainee and tracking simulated damage. Take too many hits, and the system locks you out, marking you as casualties. "Same rules apply," I said, probably sounding more vindictive than a professional instructor should. 60 seconds, 20 hostile targets mixed with 10 civilian markers. Hit a civilian and you fail automatically. Get hit 3 times and you fail. Questions? "No, sir." "Begin." Emma moved into the holographic environment, and I immediately lost sight of her in the simulated smoke and shadows. My tracking systems picked her up, but barely. She was moving tactically now, using cover, staying low, making herself a minimal target. The first hostile target appeared at her 3 o'clock. She pivoted, drew, released. The arrow took it down before it could acquire her position. She was already moving to new cover. 2 more targets appeared simultaneously, crossing patterns designed to split the trainee's attention. Emma shot the closer one first, then rolled behind a holographic barrier as the second one opened fire. Simulated plasma bolts scorched the wall above her. She came up in a different position, led the target through her shooting lane, and dropped it. This went on for 45 seconds of the most tactically sound combat movement I'd seen from any cadet in my entire teaching career. She flowed through the environment like water, always moving, never staying in one position long enough to be targeted effectively. Her arrows flew with mechanical precision, each one finding its mark despite the obscured visibility and moving targets. She took 1 hit at the 30-second mark, a glancing blow that her simulation vest registered as minor damage. Didn't even slow her down. Just adapted her movement pattern to account for the hostile's position and eliminated it on her next pass through the area. 55 seconds. 19 hostile targets down. 0 civilian casualties. 1 minor hit registered. She stood in the center of the training area, arrow nocked but not drawn, scanning for the final target. 5 seconds left. 4. 3. The last target appeared directly behind her, point-blank range, already firing. She dropped flat, rolled backward toward the threat instead of away from it, came up in a crouch, and put an arrow through the hostile's center mass at a range of maybe 2 meters. The simulation ended. Final time, 58 seconds. 20 hostile targets eliminated. 0 civilian casualties. 1 minor hit. Perfect score. The observation deck absolutely lost its mind. Cheering erupted from multiple species, creating this weird harmony of clicks, whistles, roars, and actual human applause. I saw credits already changing hands as cadets settled their bets. Emma stood there, breathing harder now, that ancient bow still in her hands, and looked up at me with an expression that could only be described as politely expectant, like she'd just completed a routine exercise instead of performing at a level that would qualify her for elite special operations units. "Satisfactory, sir?" she asked. Satisfactory. The human had just completed a Level 7 combat scenario with perfect scores using a weapon her grandfather probably built in his garage, and she was asking if it was satisfactory. I clicked my mandibles together. A different pattern this time. Respect. Grudging, but genuine. "Cadet Thorne, where exactly did you learn to shoot like that?" "My grandfather, sir. He taught me when I was 6 years old. Said that anyone could learn to point and click a fancy gun, but understanding tension, trajectory, wind resistance, and instinctive shooting would make me a better warrior no matter what weapons I eventually used." "Your grandfather sounds like a wise human." "He was, sir. Passed away 3 years ago. Left me this bow and about 10,000 arrows." She smiled slightly. "He made me promise I'd show the rest of the galaxy that humans didn't need fancy technology to be dangerous. Just skill, practice, and a willingness to adapt." Something clicked in my mind then, a realization that felt uncomfortably like personal growth. We'd all been so focused on the human's technological primitiveness that we'd completely overlooked what that actually meant. They'd survived on a death world with nothing but their brains and determination. They'd built civilizations without gravity manipulation, conquered their planet without plasma weapons, and reached space using controlled explosions. They'd learned to be dangerous with whatever they had available. "The bow is certified for military use," I announced, my voice carrying to the observation deck. "Cadet Thorne, you are cleared for advanced tactical training. Report to Special Operations Orientation next cycle." Her eyes widened. "Sir?" "You heard me, cadet. Dismissed." She gathered her equipment, that ancient bow carefully returned to its bag, and headed for the exit. The other cadets parted for her like she'd suddenly become radioactive, respect mixed with a healthy dose of fear. Good combination for a soldier. Just before she left, she turned back. "Sir, my grandfather had a saying, might be relevant." "Which was?" "Never underestimate someone who's mastered a simple tool. It means they understand the fundamentals, and fundamentals work everywhere." The door slid shut behind her, and I stood there in the training hall surrounded by hundreds of thousands of credits worth of advanced military technology, thinking about wooden sticks and string and evolutionary fundamentals. The observation deck was buzzing with conversation now. Different species arguing about what they'd just witnessed. Krathtul climbed down to the main floor, his massive Draxian frame moving with surprising grace. "That was unexpected," he rumbled in his deep voice. "That's one word for it. Think the others can replicate it?" I thought about the 37 other human cadets currently enrolled in the Academy. Thought about Earth and Death worlds, and species that learned to hunt before they learned to farm. Thought about a civilization that went from wooden bows to space flight in just a few thousand years. "I think," I said slowly, "we might want to revise our assessment of human capabilities. Because of one impressive cadet with a primitive weapon? No, because that primitive weapon just outperformed every advanced military system we threw at it. And somewhere back on Earth, There are billions more humans who grew up with the same fundamental understanding of violence and adaptation. I turned to look at him with all three eyes. We've been training them like they're technologically disadvantaged. What if they're actually tactically evolved? Krathtull made that wheezing sound again, but there was no humor in it this time. That's a concerning thought. Tell me about it. I've got 37 more human cadets in my next rotation. If even half of them show Emma's level of competence with unconventional approaches. I trailed off, the implications spinning out in my mind like a tactical simulation gone wrong. Or very, very right, depending on your perspective. The next day would bring more surprises, more impossible human tricks that made our advanced technology look clumsy by comparison. But right now, I had reports to file and lesson plans to revise, and a growing suspicion that the Coalition had severely underestimated exactly what kind of species we'd invited to join our military forces. Somewhere in the Academy archives, there was footage of Emma Thorne completing a Level 7 combat scenario with a wooden bow and carbon fiber arrows. That footage was already spreading through the military networks, being analyzed by tactical specialists and weapons experts across 36 worlds. And somewhere back on Earth, in places with names like Colorado and Tennessee and Bhutan and Scotland, other humans were probably practicing with their own grandfather's weapons, learning the fundamentals that transcended technology. Yeah, we might have made a miscalculation or 12, but that was a problem for tomorrow. The Special Operations Training Facility made the standard combat hall look like a recreational zone. Located in the lower decks of the Academy station, it sprawled across 3 levels, with environments ranging from zero-gravity chambers to high-pressure atmospheric simulators. Only the top 5% of cadets ever saw the inside of this place. I'd been summoned here by Commander Rylix Thorne, head of Special Operations Training, and someone whose reputation made battle-hardened veterans nervous. She was Velkari, a species known for their 6 limbs, compound vision, and absolutely terrifying efficiency in eliminating targets. If Rylix Thorne wanted to see me, it usually meant I'd either done something brilliant or catastrophically stupid. Given recent events, could have gone either way. She was waiting in Observation Room Alpha, watching 3 separate training scenarios simultaneously on holographic displays. Each screen showed cadets from various species attempting infiltration exercises that would make most civilians need psychological counseling just from watching. "Instructor Vex-Krill," she said without turning around. Her voice had this harmonic quality that always sounded vaguely musical and completely lethal. "I've been reviewing the footage from yesterday's certification. Here we go." "Yes, Commander." "Level 7 authorization requires my approval for standard cadets." She finally turned, all 6 of her eyes focusing on me with unsettling precision. "You exceeded your instructional parameters." The cadet demonstrated exceptional capability. I assessed that standard progression would fail to properly evaluate her skill ceiling. Interesting rationalization. One of her middle hands gestured at the central display, which now showed Emma's entire performance on loop. "Tell me what you see." I watched the footage again, trying to view it analytically rather than emotionally. Superior tactical awareness, efficient resource management, adaptive problem-solving under pressure, unconventional approach that achieved optimal results despite equipment limitations. "Now, tell me what you feel." That threw me. Velkari weren't exactly known for emotional intelligence inquiries. "Commander?" Your mandibles were clicking in the aggression pattern for the first 30 seconds of her test. Then they switched to the analytical pattern. By the end, you were displaying the confusion harmonic. She tilted her head, an eerily human gesture. You challenged her because she threatened your understanding of combat hierarchy. Well, that was uncomfortably accurate. Perhaps initially, Commander, but the results speak for themselves. They certainly do. She pulled up additional files, each one showing a different human cadet. Since your certification of Cadet Thorne, I've had 17 requests from other human cadets asking to use non-standard weapons for their evaluations. We're talking crossbows, throwing knives, something called a tomahawk, and one particularly bold request involving a weapon called a katana. Are you approving them? I'm considering it, but first, I want you to run an experiment. She closed the files and fixed me with that unnerving, multi-eyed stare. Select 5 human cadets at random. Give them access to both Coalition standard weapons and their preferred primitive alternatives. Run them through combat scenarios together as a unit. I want to see if yesterday was an anomaly, or if we're looking at a systemic pattern. You think the humans have been hiding their capabilities? I think they've been adapting to our training without showing us what they're actually capable of when operating on their own terms. She pulled up a personnel file. Did you know Cadet Thorne ranked in the 70th percentile for plasma rifle accuracy during her initial training? Barely above average. I hadn't known that, which meant either she'd improved dramatically or she'd been performing at a level that wouldn't draw attention. They're testing us, Relax Thorne continued, learning our systems, understanding our tactics, waiting to see how we'd respond to their actual combat methodologies. A sound that might have been laughter came from her vocal chamber. Smart. Irritating, but smart. When do you want this experiment conducted? Tomorrow. Early cycle. And Vex-Krill? She turned back to her displays. Try to keep an open mind this time. Our job is to produce effective soldiers, not enforce our assumptions about how warfare should be conducted. I left feeling like I'd been simultaneously complimented and reprimanded, which was probably intentional. The next morning, I stood in Training Bay 7 with 5 randomly selected human cadets and a selection of weapons that would have made any military historian weep with joy. Emma wasn't among them, having already been reassigned to accelerated special operations training. These 5 were relative unknowns, at least to me. Cadet James Okoye, tall and powerfully built, had brought what he called a spear. Not a vibro lance or plasma-tipped pike, but an actual wooden shaft with a leaf-shaped metal blade. He explained his father had been part of something called a historical recreation society back in Nigeria. Cadet Lynn Sato, compact and intense, carried a recurve bow significantly smaller than Emma's compound model. She claimed it was modeled after designs from ancient Japan, and said something about mounted archery that I didn't fully process. Cadet Pavel Volkov had brought knives. Lots of knives. Throwing knives, fighting knives, something he called a Bowie knife that looked large enough to qualify as a short sword. His grin suggested he was very much looking forward to this evaluation. Cadet Amara Singh carried a staff, just a simple wooden pole, about 2 meters long, worn smooth from what must have been years of practice. She mentioned growing up studying something called Silambam in Tamil Nadu, and Cadet Marcus Webb, who looked too young to be in military training, had brought a sling, as in a piece of leather with 2 cords attached. He demonstrated by putting a stone through a practice target at 30 meters, then smiled apologetically like he'd done something embarrassing rather than impressive. Right, I said, surveying this collection of historical warfare. Commander Relax Thorne wants to see how you perform as a unit using your preferred equipment. Standard coalition weapons are available if you want them as backups. Will we be penalized for using both? James asked, his hand resting comfortably on his spear shaft. Not if it's tactically sound. They exchanged glances, some kind of silent communication happening between them. Lynn spoke first. "We've been talking among ourselves, comparing notes. Most of us have been training with these weapons since childhood, but we defaulted to coalition standard equipment because we assumed that's what you wanted to see. So you've been holding back." "Not holding back," Pavel corrected, flipping one of his knives in a casual pattern that somehow seemed threatening. "Just adapting. But if you want to see what humans actually do in combat situations, give us opponents who think we're only capable of pointing and shooting energy weapons." Oh, this was going to be interesting. I programmed a scenario called Urban Extraction, typically reserved for third-year tactical units. The objective was simple: infiltrate a hostile zone, retrieve a high-value target, and extract without casualties. The opposing force consisted of 20 holographic combatants with military-grade weapons and tactical awareness. Most teams failed this scenario. The ones that succeeded usually took 45 minutes and sustained multiple simulated casualties. "You have 1 hour," I told them. "Mission parameters on your tactical displays. Questions?" Marcus raised his hand. "Are we authorized to use stealth approaches?" "Use whatever tactics you deem appropriate." They huddled together for maybe 90 seconds, speaking in low voices while occasionally gesturing at the scenario map. Then they separated, each moving to different entry points in the holographic environment. The scenario began. For the first 3 minutes, absolutely nothing happened. The holographic enemies maintained their patrol patterns, completely unaware that 5 human cadets had infiltrated their perimeter. I checked my sensors twice, confirming that yes, all 5 humans were inside the operational zone. They were just invisible to the enemy tracking systems. Not literally invisible, I realized as I enhanced the sensor feeds. They were using the environment, moving during patrol gaps, timing their advancement to coincide with visual obstructions. Basic infiltration techniques, but executed with a patience that most cadets lacked. The first holographic guard went down silently. Marcus had positioned himself on an elevated platform, and his sling made barely any sound as the stone caught the guard in the head sensor. The hologram collapsed, registered as incapacitated. Before anyone could react, Pavel emerged from cover, and 2 throwing knives hit 2 more guards in rapid succession. He'd aimed for the throat sensors, the fastest incapacitation points. The remaining guards went on alert, weapons raised, scanning for threats. Amara exploded from a blind spot, her staff moving in controlled arcs that deflected simulated weapons fire while striking sensor points with surgical precision. She dropped 3 guards in maybe 5 seconds before disappearing back into cover. Lynn appeared on a different elevation, her smaller bow allowing her to shoot from positions where a larger weapon would have been unwieldy. She was firing rapidly, each arrow targeting exposed sensors with accuracy that rivaled Emma's performance. James used his spear like a tool of precision surgery rather than a crude stabbing implement. He'd attached it to himself with some kind of harness, allowing him to keep both hands free for climbing and movement. When he engaged, the spear extended his reach significantly, letting him strike from positions the holograms didn't anticipate. They moved through the scenario like water flowing downhill, always taking the path of least resistance, adapting instantly when resistance appeared. When they encountered the high-value target, secured in a locked room with 2 guards, Pavel picked the lock with one of his smaller knives, while Amara and James held the corridor. 12 minutes into the scenario, they were extracting the target. 13 minutes in, they encountered the inevitable problem. 20 alerted guards between them and the extraction point, with no way to stealth past that many aware opponents. They adapted, Lynn and Marcus positioned themselves at elevation, providing covering fire with their ranged weapons. Every time a guard tried to advance, stones or arrows forced them back into cover. The accuracy was absurd, each projectile hitting exactly where it needed to create maximum disruption. Pavel threw a knife at a structural weak point in the holographic environment, causing a simulated collapse that blocked one approach route. James used his spear to vault over an obstacle, coming down behind 3 guards who had no idea someone could cover that distance without technology. Amara became a whirlwind of controlled violence, her staff deflecting incoming fire while striking any guard who got within range. She was using the weapon defensively and offensively simultaneously, creating space for the high-value target to move through. They reached the extraction point at 16 minutes with 0 casualties and all 20 hostile forces neutralized or evaded. I stared at the chronometer, certain there was a malfunction, checked the scenario logs, verified the difficulty settings. Everything was correct. 5 human cadets with primitive weapons had just demolished a scenario that usually took experienced teams 3 times as long with 4 times the casualties. Commander Rylax Thorne's voice came through my comm unit. "I'm watching the feeds, Instructor. Tell me what you think just happened." "I think we've been evaluating them based on our combat doctrine instead of theirs, Commander." "Elaborate." "I watched the 5 humans receiving congratulations from each other, their primitive weapons held casually like extensions of their own bodies. Coalition doctrine emphasizes superior firepower and technological advantage. We expect overwhelming force to solve tactical problems, but humans evolved on a world where they weren't the strongest or fastest predators. They learned to succeed through adaptability, patience, and using every available resource creatively." Continue. "We've been training them to be less effective versions of ourselves instead of highly effective versions of themselves." The realization felt heavy. Their weapons aren't primitive. They are optimized for different tactical philosophies that we never bothered to understand. "Do you still think plasma rifles are superior to wooden bows, Instructor?" I thought about Emma putting arrows through moving targets in complete darkness, about Marcus hitting sensors from 30 meters with a leather sling, about Amara deflecting simulated plasma bolts with a wooden stick. "I think the question is irrelevant, Commander. A weapon is only as effective as the warrior wielding it and the tactical situation it's employed in. The humans understand this instinctively because they never had the luxury of technological superiority." "Good answer." I could hear satisfaction in her harmonic voice. "Get them cleaned up and send them to my office. I have an assignment that requires exactly their particular skill set." The comm disconnected. I approached the 5 cadets, who were examining their equipment and discussing the scenario with the intense focus of professionals reviewing their performance. They looked up as I approached, expressions cautious but curious. "Gentlemen, lady, that was exceptional work," I said, meaning every word. "Commander Rylax Thorne wants to see you immediately. I suspect this is very good news for your military careers." James grinned. "Does this mean we can keep using our own gear?" "I suspect the commander is going to insist on it." They left, talking excitedly among themselves, and I stood alone in the training bay surrounded by discarded holographic constructs and the lingering evidence of paradigm-shifting performance. My comm unit activated again. This time, it was Krath Tull. "Vex, you need to see the tactical networks. The footage from yesterday and today is spreading through every military installation in the Coalition. Everyone's talking about the humans and their primitive weapons. Is that a problem?" "Depends on your perspective. 3 separate Special Forces commanders have already requested human cadets for their units. The Weapons Development Bureau wants to study the biomechanics of archery and spear throwing. And the Strategic Planning Division is having some kind of existential crisis about force projection doctrine. I clicked my mandibles in what might have been amusement. Let me guess. They're realizing that technological superiority doesn't guarantee tactical superiority. Something like that. There's also been a formal request from Earth, Military Command. They want to send instructors to teach coalition forces about historical combat methodologies and adaptive warfare. How are the other species responding? Mixed reactions. Some think it's brilliant. Others think it's insulting that we'd learn from such a young species. He paused. What do you think? I thought about Emma and her grandfather's bow, about 5 cadets turning primitive tools into devastating tactical advantages, about billions of humans back on Earth who'd grown up understanding that creativity and adaptability mattered more than raw power. I think we should be grateful they're our allies and not our enemies, I said finally. And I think we have a lot to learn from a species that never had the option of solving problems with superior technology. Scary thought, terrifying thought, but also useful. 3 months later, the Intergalactic Military Academy unveiled a new training program called Adaptive Combat Methodologies. Human instructors taught coalition cadets everything from archery to knife fighting to staff work. At first, the other species approached it with condescension, viewing it as anthropological curiosity rather than practical training. That attitude lasted exactly until the first joint exercises, where humans using primitive weapons consistently outperformed technologically superior opponents through better tactics and situational awareness. Emma Thorne became the youngest Special Operations team leader in coalition history. Her unit, composed of mixed species all trained in both advanced and historical weapons, achieved mission success rates that made statistical analysts question their data. And somewhere in the Coalition Strategic Planning Division, a new doctrine was being written, one that acknowledged what the humans had known all along. Wars weren't won by the side with the best technology, but by the side that best understood how to apply whatever resources they had available. I still taught advanced weapons certification, but now my curriculum included sections on historical combat analysis and unconventional tactical thinking. My students came from dozens of species, and they all learned to respect the lesson that a human cadet with her grandfather's bow had taught us. Never mistake simplicity for weakness. Never confuse technological advancement with tactical superiority. And never, ever underestimate someone who's mastered the fundamentals. Because fundamentals work everywhere, and humans had spent their entire evolutionary history proving exactly that. The instructor had laughed at primitive weapons until the human unveiled her grandfather's bow. Now the instructor taught those same primitive weapons to every species in the coalition, understanding that the real lesson wasn't about bows or spears or knives. It was about remembering that survival skills transcend technology, and sometimes the most dangerous warrior is the one who never forgot how to be dangerous with nothing at all. That was a lesson worth learning, even if it came wrapped in wood and string and 10,000 years of human evolutionary experience.